This podcast may contain paid advertisements, but more on that later. Welcome to the O'Connor Bootstrap Podcast, your go-to resource for unraveling the intricacies of business and leadership, honing in on the essence of bootstrapping a business from scratch. Whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur, a dedicated bootstrapper, or a leader navigating life's various challenges, this podcast is crafted just for you. I'm Isaiah O'Connor, your friendly neighborhood entrepreneur, and my mission is to guide you towards personal and professional growth. Let's embark on this journey together. Now, with new episodes dropping weekly, I want to welcome you to the Remastered series, your chance to catch up on the journey so far. Here's one from the archives I think you'll enjoy. Today I'll be telling a story about a man named Spencer. Spencer, he had a lot of setbacks in his life. He had a lot of struggles, big ones that would destroy a lot of people. But despite all of these, he pushed through and he made a rather large impact on history. So let's tell Spencer's story. He was born starting promisingly enough off in England on November 30 in 1874. His family were a lordly class. They had a title, they had land, they were decently well off, and you would think that because of all the status, being wealth, having wealth and power, his dad being a member of parliament, that he would be set for life. Well, yes and no. Because because of the status of his family, he was all but ignored by his parents, which was actually rather typical of the day. So he was pretty much raised by a nanny until he was 7 years old. And then at 7 years old, they booted him off to boarding school, and that was that. Goodbye. We'll see you later. Don't forget to write. Have a nice life. That was his start to life. And then at the boarding school, that was fairly common for that to happen. But, well, at the boarding school, he didn't do so well. He was always at the bottom of the class. Matter of fact, when they would walk into class and walk into like school assemblies or anything for the parents or any special thing, they would always enter the room in order of grades. Top of the class came in first, bottom of the class came in last. And young Mr. Spencer was always last in line coming in because he was the bottom of the class. He was a horrible student. As for his family, his mom rarely visited, forgot to send him Christmas gifts, and was just more or less neglectful. His dad was worse. He never visited him. He never had a real relationship with his dad. And his dad could never even remember how old he was. And his dad's opinion of his son? Well, he was a troublesome boy who was also too dumb to go to a good university. So I might as well throw him into military school. He might have a chance in the military because he's definitely not smart enough for a university. So he sent him to military school. And even that he almost couldn't get into because of having such poor grades. He had to actually get a tutor to work him up to barely squeak in just to get into the military school. Well, turns out the military school was a good thing for him. Despite the hardships and despite having struggles with the school before, he graduated 20th out of 130 students. In the top quarter of his class, a little bit more than quarter, whatever. But that was a pretty decent jump, 20th from usually being in the bottom. So at least he did that. And then naturally in those times, if you graduated from military school, you would enlist in the army. And you would join the army and that would be your career. So he enlisted, but he had some time. He had quite a few months in between. And so he decided to go and become a war correspondent in Cuba. So he went to Cuba, and I can't remember which war what it was that was going on at that point. But he just sat there and he wrote on the war that was going on in Cuba. And he wrote back, and his post that he was writing back home was very popular, and he was making a pretty good amount of money off of it. And things seemed to go well. So he finished his time up in Cuba, and he went back, and much to his surprise, he found he was accused of being a spy, because why else would a young man go off and write about a war that was going on that had nothing to do with England, or very little? He had to have been a spy. He wasn't, but he eventually cleared his name on that. But yeah, just writing on a war, it was exciting. He was kind of a modern day version of a blogger. He would go write about what he saw, what he wrote. He was a reporter. But people thought he had bad motives, so whatever. But he got that cleared out. So he came back, and then he joined the military, fought bravely and with distinction, and remained a war correspondent. And when he was done with his military service, he came back to England and he wrote a few books. And in those books, he was very honorable and very honest about what he saw and told the true story of what he saw. And unfortunately, he made some enemies of top military brass because he told the truth about the army and the way things were run. The not very complimentary truth to the military brass. They did not like that, and they remembered this. Years and years later, this would come back to haunt them. But he was just being honest, and he wrote books. And they sold pretty well, and he was happy enough with that. So, after he served his time, he resigned his commission, and again, decided to go down to another war, the Boer War in South Africa. I was a war correspondent again. But this time, he was captured as a prisoner of war. And he was captured actually trying to help save a whole bunch of other people. So he was captured, was being held as a prisoner of war, and escaped. And made it back to England. And he arrived home, now famous. He made a huge impact that he got captured and released. And he became a kind of well-known guy. And he wrote more books. And he used his fame to become a member of Parliament. Now, his time in Parliament was full of controversy, which just seemed to follow him around like a bagged penny. There's so much controversy, most of which I can't even begin to get into. Then he was a member of Parliament during World War I, and one of his decisions became super controversial and caused a lot of problems. Matter of fact, it was one of the great military disasters of English history, one of the great military blunders of English history, and because of this, he was removed from his position. At the time of this, a lot of his friends abandoned him and let him take the full brunt of the fallout from the disaster. There was a lot of people involved, but he took all the heat of this mistake. So he lost his high position in Parliament, and he still was a member of Parliament, but the way the parliamentary system worked, at least at this time, I'm not super well versed in the English Parliament, but basically, if you're a member of Parliament, I think it was kind of similar to the United States Senate, which is you could just be there and vote and do stuff, but you didn't really have a job to do. You were there just to kind of debate and argue, and you could introduce legislation back and forth, but you didn't really have a position. And the higher members would have different positions: Council of the Exchequer, Treasury Secretary, First Lord of the Navy, the Prime Minister. These were all jobs within the Parliament that were more or less your position in Parliament outside of just being there to vote. So they gave them, and everyone had their job, but most of them were just administrative, and they gave them a job that was basically like busing down a detective down to traffic cop who goes around and writes tickets. That was the equivalent of what they did to him. He just out of favor and did pretty much nothing for the next several years. And he was older at this time. I think he was in his 60s, 56 years old. He was about 56 years old, and everyone that knew him thought he was a complete, he was done. He was an old guy, old man. His political career was ruined. He had lost everything in shame, and he thought he was done. Everyone thought he was done. No one believed he had anything left in him. Well, World War II broke out, and they brought him back, and he, even though he was a member of Parliament, and despite all of his problems, despite all of his unpopularity and all the controversy that he kept surrounding himself with, he did become very instrumental in defeating Nazi Germany. After the defeat of Germany, Britain held a general election, and he lost his position again, but he again remained a member of Parliament. So he gained a high position in Parliament during World War II, helped defeat the Germans, and then as soon as the Germans were defeated, he was immediately voted back out of high office again. So he won and they fired him. He saved the day and they fired him. That was his life. So he was, again, pretty much a jobless member of Parliament, as it were. And he did keep causing more and more controversy everywhere he went. Unintentionally, but he just managed to always land himself in controversy, landing himself in hot water. But eventually they brought him back to Parliament. He again regained high office in Parliament, and he held it until he retired in 1955. After he retired, he gave a speech in which he said this: "Never give in. Never give in. Never, 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 never. In nothing, great or small, large or petty, never give in, except to convictions of honor and good sense. Never yield to force, never yield to the apparently overwhelming might of the enemy." Well, as you may have guessed by now, Spencer, his full name was Sir Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill. Winston Churchill. This is what I've been talking about. The man who probably saved the entire free world. Had controversy after controversy after controversy after hardship after hardship after hardship. And when you look back in his life, you find a story of a flawed man who had all these struggles, made huge mistakes. By the way, the huge mistake in World War I was the Dardanelles, one of the worst military blunders in history. He was responsible for it. Not solely responsible, but he got blamed for it all. He did make mistakes. He had controversy following around. He had a lot of people hate him. And he pushed through, and because he pushed through, he basically saved the free world. If you dig into World War II history, when they made him prime minister, they were hoping he would negotiate peace with Germany and then just look bad and have to retire and resign in shame. But instead he chose to fight and convince Parliament to fight on, even if they had to fight on alone. Even after France fell, he fought on to defeat the enemy, to bring peace and push back tyranny. This is the guy who did that because he chose to never give up, no matter the hardship, no matter what happens. Now, his life has been very inspiring to me. Obviously, this story I just told has inspiration behind it about Winston Churchill and never giving up. And the question comes to, that's great, Isaiah, but how does this apply to business? Well, back to my other podcast where I was talking about bottlenecks and waiting things out and pushing through and not stopping. When you're going through hell, don't stop. That's a trick. Because when you start up and when you're in business, you're going to hit hard times. You just will. It's just the nature of the beast. If you're not hitting hard times, you're likely doing something wrong. And if you're not doing something wrong and still not experiencing hard times, they'll come. Because that's just the nature of life. Hard times do come. Things do hit you. Things take you by surprise. That's just life. unexpected things happen in your life. You never know what could happen. Somebody close to you can die. You can have suddenly come up with cancer. You can have lots of things go on. Your supplier just disappears. One of my friends I know here, they had a supplier for a product and in another country, and I placed an order for them, and they asked their supplier. They got half the order, and then the other half just disappeared. They called the supplier, and all of a sudden, their phone number was disconnected. Their emails never came back. They just dropped off the face of the earth. Just poof. Their sole supplier of the product just vanished overnight. Just gone. Had no idea where. There was no forwarding address, nothing. So yeah, it sucks. I felt really bad for them too. But you never know, what hardships are coming your way. But never give in. Winston Churchill said it best: never give in, never give in, never, 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 never. Never. Just never give in. And even when it comes to business, if you start a business and you fail, great. You just learn what not to do next time. Start over. Start the similar type of business. Start a different business. Do something different. Jump out there. Start, fail. But never give up. Learn from your mistakes. Every time you fall, you get up, you dust yourself up, and do better. And then you fall down, you get up, you dust yourself off, and you do better. And you keep doing this over and over and over again until you win. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and bring us to a close. But what can I say? Never give up. Never give up. And until next time, I've been your friendly neighborhood entrepreneur, Isaiah O'Connor. If today's episode added value to your day, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment and consider giving us a stellar 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform. Whether it's Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcast, or more. And remember, if you leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcast, I will personally read it out in the next episode. To support the show, you can make a one-time gift by buying us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/bootstrap, donate through PayPal at paypal.me/IOCPOD, or make a contribution on our Patreon page at patreon.com/IOCPOD. Your support keeps the episodes coming. For even more content and exclusive perks, join our Patreon community at patreon.com/IOCPod. Patrons enjoy ad-free episodes, access to our private Discord server, early content previews, and a lot more. And here's an exciting offer. Get your free trial of our $5 a month Bootstrapper Community Explorer tier. This exclusive tier grants you ad-free content, Discord server access, and early content previews. Join us and be part of the inner circle. If you're feeling more generous, those who join tiers $25 a month and up will have a chance to be a featured guest on this podcast. A massive thank you to Wintergatan for generously providing the incredible intro and outro music at no cost. We appreciate their support. Be sure to check out Wintergatan's amazing work on YouTube at youtube.com/@Wintergatan. Until next time, I'm your friendly neighborhood entrepreneur, Isaiah O'Connor, signing off. This is the O'Connor Bootstrap Podcast, brought to you by Athos Business Solutions. For our companion podcast, the Athos Business Podcast, hosted by Jason St. Clair, along with past episodes and related blogs, visit our website at athos.com. That's ATHEOZ.com or theoz.com. Goodbye for now.